in Jerick Hall, the 5-star running back out of IMG Academy. Because when you look at the roster for the Georgia Bulldogs, they're young up and down and across the board in every which way, east, west, but they got a couple juniors on their teams. They had Kenny McIntosh, who is a senior, and I don't know how many of these guys are returning. I don't know if any of them have hit the portal. I really don't follow a lot of Georgia football, even though I probably should since they're one of the top teams in the country. But you would expect that part of the 2024 class, one of the priority needs for the staff is going to be at the running back position. However, something that I think is pretty interesting in terms of the recruiting trail for Georgia, and something I think we need to keep our eyes and ears on, especially when it comes to maybe Georgia potentially three-peating, it's the idea that Todd Monken might potentially be going to the NFL. Right? If Todd Monken goes to the NFL, I think you're looking at a potential possibility where Georgia does not land a Dylan Raiola, who I know he's favored with a lot of experts to land at Georgia. I don't favor him to go there. That's just my opinion, though. When you look at Jarek Gibson, you see, Texas is in this battle. Tennessee is in there. And you wonder, if Todd Monken leaves, is Georgia still potentially a favorite to land him out of IMG Academy? I have no idea. He did. Now, it is important to note, Jerick Hall did take his junior day visit to Florida. He was not at Georgia. And I think that's interesting to note for a lot of big-time players. KJ Bolden was not at Georgia. He was the number 1 safety in the country, the number 4 overall player. Ultimately, I ended up having him going to Clemson because you hear of him and Sammy Brown's relationship with Dabo Sweeney is great. And for KJ Bolden, I think we can look at those unofficial visits and say it's too easy to say that because he's had 10 unofficial visits to Georgia that's where he's going, because he's only 49 miles away, right? As he has to drive, I think it's like 90 miles to Clemson. So I don't think they land KJ Bolden. I think it goes to Clemson. Additionally, you have Mike Matthews, the number 1 athlete and the number 3 overall player out of Liburn, Georgia. Again, this is another guy I think that ends up at Clemson. He's taken 4 visits there unofficially. It's something interesting to keep Georgia fans can keep their eye on. But I think a bright spot for Georgia is your defense, right? You still have Kirby Smart there. Edric Houston, the number 1 defensive lineman, the number 8 overall player out of Buford, Georgia. I really like what they could potentially get in him. I think that's ultimately where Edric Houston ends up, is Georgia. And then, you also have King Joseph Edwards, who I've seen on Twitter a lot. He's been floated around. So those are a couple of the interesting recruitments. But when you're looking at the Georgia Bulldogs and the number 1 class, it's interesting because right now they hold the number 1 class with 10 commitments at a 266 or 226.59 composite score. And you see it as they have the number 2 safety in the country, the number 1 tight end in the country, the number 3 safety in the country. And I just look at it and go, are they going to be able to hold a lot of these commitments? I have no idea. I don't think so. I really don't. Because, again, I think Ellis Robinson flips. It seems like you can't count out Coach Prime for the number 1 cornerback in the country every single year. And I said it, and I'll continue saying it. I don't think you see Alabama and Georgia both in the top 5. I think you only see one of those teams in the top 5. And we know that Alabama is going to be coming back for a vengeance next season against Georgia. And if they show out, right, and they win the national championship, they could potentially land with the best SEC recruiting class potentially, because I think the Florida Gators will be right up there. So it's going to be interesting because the Georgia Bulldogs currently hold the number 1 class, and you've seen Alabama and Georgia and Texas A&M kind of flip-flop in the top 3. You've seen Georgia hold the number 1 class at some point. So it'll be interesting to see where all this lies. It'll be interesting to see if Georgia's able to three-peat. That's, I think, really the thing here. If Georgia's able to three-peat, I think they're going to solidify themselves as one of the best destinations in the country. I think, if I'm a recruit and I'm looking at Georgia, right, I've seen some players enter the portal, and they're really good players. And, yeah, they might have not seen the field a whole lot, but I think that goes to say how good of the talent is that Georgia has on that team. And if you're a talented 5-star, why would you go to Georgia to sit on the bench for 2 or 3 years when you could go to another program and start right away and still be developed at a high level? Uh, and with the college football playoffs expanding in 2024 and 2025, I think that's going to hurt a lot of the upper teams in terms of recruiting. You guys might jump in the comments and tell me I'm crazy and insane, but when you look at the expanded playoffs possibility, you can go to a team like UCF at the Big 12, Colorado in the Pac 12, maybe a North Carolina in the ACC, and still have a chance to make the college football playoffs and potentially play for a national championship, because it's no longer just the talent that's on the 4 teams. It's going to be a 12-team playoff. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see how this recruiting cycle lands and how Georgia lands in it, because Georgia's been dominant. And, when Georgia wants a player, they get it. Hence, Oklahoma losing Anthony Edwards to Georgia, which kind of sucked. But if Georgia wants somebody, they're going to get him. And that's what Nick Saban has done for a long time. And I feel like Georgia's on that level now. The question is, can Georgia maintain that? Nick Saban has maintained it for, gosh, it feels like 2 centuries right now. But it's only been, 15 years? 15 years at Alabama or something like that. So if Kirby Smart can do it, hats off. So, the eyes are on Georgia right now. The eyes are on Georgia. Now, I will say this. I don't have a top 25 out yet because I want to see the spring. However, I already know who's going to be number 1 in my top 25, because I'm not going to disrespect Georgia like everybody else does across the country. Georgia's going to be number 1 in my books. They won the national championship again. They went undefeated. They're the team to beat. They should hold the right to be number 1, and until somebody beats them, they're number 1. So jump down in the comments below, Georgia fans. Let me know what y'all think about the recruiting class. Do you guys think you'll be number 1? And then we'll bring you guys some more videos as the recruiting cycle continues to speed up a little bit, and I can get some notes and talk to some of these recruits.